From the beaches of Daytona and the visionary mind of Bill France Sr., NASCAR was born. A father and son team that would make stock car racing a nationwide sport.
Those guys put their whole life building this sport. They made the kind of contribution that warrants them being in the Hall of Fame, and we're proud of that. Legends were born with names like Junior.
Getting in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. There's not going to be another first.
Intimidator.
It's been a pretty exciting career, been enjoyable.
And King.
It's nothing like being put into the initial deal to be NASCAR.
Now, the sports legends will be enshrined in a hall of their own. Welcome to this special presentation, First Class. Now, here are your hosts, Delano Little and Danielle Trotta.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for this special look at the first class of inductees into the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
They're household names, they're legends, and they helped make NASCAR what it is today. Dale Earnhardt, Junior Johnson, Bill France Sr., Bill France Jr., and the King, Richard Petty. Each one changed the sport in their own way.
During this next half hour, an in-depth look at the inductees and their contributions to NASCAR. We begin with the Intimidator, Dale Earnhardt. Race fans and non-race fans alike remember that 3 and the legacy it represents. David Wisnett explains why Earnhardt is one of the greatest and most loved drivers the sport has ever seen.
We know him as the Intimidator, one tough customer. The man in black. She knew him as her son.
This is my favorite picture, me and Dale. I was real proud of what he accomplished.
His 7 championships, 76 wins, and millions of fans made him an American icon. But Martha Earnhardt knew her son, even as a child growing up in Kannapolis, was driven to win.
That's all he ever wanted to do. He never wanted to go to school. He didn't want to finish school, and he didn't finish school. We promised him almost everything to try to get him to finish, but that's all he wanted was drive a race car.
Dale's father, Ralph Earnhardt, is also a legend. A sportsman champion in the 50s, he steered clear of racing's biggest circuit to spend more time at home with Martha and their 5 children. Dale's own big-time racing career started at Charlotte Motor Speedway in 1975 in the World 600. It was 2 years after Ralph had passed away.
He struggled so hard, and after his father died, he tried to, struggle to make it on his own and with help of friends and everything.
The big break came in 1978 when car owner Rod Osterlund noticed something about Dale Earnhardt that his mother had already seen.
I had seen him drive in the, lower class model, cars, and so I knew he did have some talent.
You don't really set goals. Well, I'm going to be Western Cup champion. I wanted to be a race driver. I want to drive a race car and win races. And then you win races, and then you win a championship, and this happens. Things just sort of snowball, really, is about how it happened for us.
The snowball started rolling in 1979. Earnhardt was Rookie of the Year. The very next season, he won the first of his 7 championships. His partnership with former driver and car owner Richard Childress produced his greatest seasons. In 1990, the heartbreak over losing the Daytona 500 on the last lap was softened somewhat when Earnhardt won 9 races and his 4th championship.
We're really happy for everybody that helped us. Really appreciate everybody's help and all the fans' support this year. It's been a great year for us.
Despite all the success, the persona that attracted the sport's most loyal fans, one thing had eluded Dale Earnhardt: the Daytona 500, the sport's biggest race.
I know how hard he had tried to win, and something always happens.
But then in 1998, after years of things going wrong, everything went right.
Dale Earnhardt will come to the caution flag to win the Daytona 500.
He had finally done it, taken the checkers in the 500. Martha was watching on TV at home in Kannapolis.
To see the other pit crew people line up to congratulate him is what really made me feel good about how he must have felt.
It moved me tremendously. The fans, they were cheering and jumping up and down. This was for the race fans.
Amid all that jubilation and celebration in Victory Lane, Dale Earnhardt had to make a call. When asked if he was talking to the president,
the phone rang after the race was over, and it was him calling me from Winter Circle. tell me that he finally won the race. And I said, I know, I was watching you, son. I said, it makes me real proud.
A picture of that moment is one of Martha Earnhardt's prized possessions. But for all the glory the track at Daytona brought him, it would also be a mournful blemish on the Earnhardt legend. It began with so much hope. Earnhardt had told many he felt that the 2001 season would bring him his 8th championship, breaking his tie with Richard Petty and putting him in a class by himself.
He was going to try to break that record last year, but it didn't happen.
On the last lap, going into the last turn, Earnhardt was caught up in a wreck. His car drove straight into the turn 4 wall. At age 49, the man described as larger than life was dead.
It's just hard to comprehend sometimes, you know.
Now, 9 years later, Earnhardt is a winner again. He and Richard Petty were considered absolute locks for the first class in the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
Yeah, definitely he was going to be in the Hall of Fame, okay. You know, just because of his personality, the excitement that he brought when he showed up at the racetrack.
I had no dreams of being Winston Cup champion or even racing against Richard Petty or any of those guys. And then one day you're riding along the racetrack and Richard Petty blows by you and about blows you off the racetrack. That happened about '74, so it's been a pretty exciting career, been enjoyable.
To the woman who knew him as well as anybody,
come on here.
The Hall of Fame is a fitting tribute to his life and legacy.
It just has humbled me to say how many people love my child, and he was a great son and a great race car driver.
His legend will live on forever in the hearts and minds of NASCAR fans everywhere.
Now coming up, innovative driver and owner Junior Johnson. He tells us how he went from running moonshine to driving race cars. You're watching a special presentation, First Class.
Welcome back to this special presentation, First Class. He's one of the most well-known and successful driver owners in NASCAR's 60-year-plus history, but even more impressive, he never even planned on getting involved in the sport.
Yeah, and today you can still find Junior Johnson in the same place where it all started for him. The story of Junior Johnson starts in the hills and back roads of western North Carolina.
You know, I grew up in the moonshine business.
His early races, outrunning the law.
I was hauling moonshine about 14 years old, and I'm telling you that I had some great times of doing it.
His brother saw his talent and at 16 had him race in an exhibition in North Wilkesboro.
I was plowing a mule in the cornfield. He says, come on, I want you to drive my car.
Junior did and finished second, but his racing career didn't take off right away.
It didn't really excite me all that much because I was already used to fast cars.
Eventually, he did come to enjoy honest racing, and in 1955, he got his first Grand National win at historic Hickory Motor Speedway. He would win 5 times that year. In 1960, despite having a slow car, he teamed up with legendary engine builder Ray Fox to race in the Daytona 500 and discovered a major racing technique in the process. You invented drafting.
I found it.
After dropping in behind faster cars during practice and then catching right up to them, Junior had an idea.
And I said to myself, I said, you know, if I can do everybody on the racetrack like I did them 2 cars, I don't know what it is, but I'll do pretty good at this racetrack.
Good indeed. He and Fox took home the win, and his name is forever engraved on the Harley J. Earl Trophy. By the 1960s, his cars were better than anyone else. Junior became accustomed to the spoils of victory, racking up 50 wins in just 14 years. Then, after 1964, he got out of the car and walked away.
It was not exciting for me to win a race. At the time that I walked away, there wasn't a person out there that could race with me.
Junior would come back to racing, this time as a car owner, and he would be just as successful. Many of NASCAR's 50 greatest drivers sawed the wheel for him, racking up 132 wins. But his most successful drivers had to be Cale Yarborough and Darrell Waltrip. The two combined for 6 championships. So, who was the best man to drive for him?
I've always kind of told Darrell and Cale that I was a car owner and I was a driver. I thought I was the best driver I ever had. It kind of gets their goat.
Through the years, one thing has stayed constant for this racing icon, and that's his love for his farm in the North Carolina mountains.
This is my office.
Most days you can find Junior where we found him, in his garage. This day, cooking up cornbread. He's been out of racing for 15 years, but he hasn't stopped working. He's back in the moonshine business again. This time it's legal. As we chat at the table, he signs bottles of shine and talks about his other business venture, Junior Johnson Foods, an entire line of Southern treats that he's very proud of.
Is that good?
Good stuff. As his induction into the Hall of Fame nears, his legacy is coming full circle. His 16-year-old son, Robert, recently started his own racing career. You give him any advice at all, or you just kind of let him go and do his own thing?
I let him go and do his own thing. He is smart. You know, he's not going to take any changes.
And while Robert and his sister are Junior's biggest accomplishments in life, getting into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot ranks ahead of all the wins and championships in his racing career.
But getting in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot, there's not going to be none of the first. It's just absolutely unbelievable for me.
Yeah, we had a great time hanging out on Junior Johnson's farm for a couple of hours.
Certainly a great memory to always keep with you.
Yes.
Well, coming up, without these two men, there would be no NASCAR. How Bill France Sr. and Bill France Jr. made the sport what it is today. You're watching a special presentation, First Class. Welcome back to this special presentation, First Class. He created NASCAR.
And his son took it to the next level.
The contributions of Bill France Sr. and Bill France Jr. are more than a legacy. They're the foundation of what has now become one of the most watched sports in America. The story of NASCAR and the France family are one and the same. They've had racing in their life since their days in diapers. But NASCAR as we know it may have never happened if Bill France Sr. hadn't left the only home he'd ever known.
Well, they had one of those 3-foot snowstorms in Washington, D.C., and I didn't want to work on automobiles in that snow and started to Florida. And then when we got to Daytona, we thought it was the most beautiful place we'd ever seen.
From Washington, D.C., Big Bill, as they called him, moved his family into one of these Daytona Beach bungalows for $13 a month. He was a driver, and a pretty good one, finishing 5th in the first ever beach race. He then found his true calling as a race promoter. Legendary car owner and engine builder Ray Fox saw it all unfold.
AAA was ahead of it then, and they weren't doing a very good job, so Bill took it over. And the minute he took it over, he knew exactly what he was going to do, and it just got big.
Senior felt that drivers could make more money if the races had a better set of rules, more organization. So he called a group of men to meet at the Streamline Hotel. And on February 21st, 1948, NASCAR was born.
He's moving up to the checkered flag.
NASCAR gave him a new name, but racing remained the same. Down Highway A1A and the beaches for the next 11 years. Drivers would eventually trade the sand for more traditional tracks like Darlington, but Bill Sr. had a vision to build them bigger and faster than ever before. Daytona International Speedway came alive in 1959.
To think that he built Daytona and then went to Talladega and built it, he was a very, very smart man.
With 2 super speedways and tracks like Charlotte, it had fans coming in and drivers began making more money, although it was still mainly a Southern sport. Bill France Jr. picked up where his dad left off and elevated NASCAR to the next level. That changing of the guard began in 1972. His son Brian was just 10 years old.
You know, I do remember sort of being big news at the time, and the sport of NASCAR has always been sort of, you know, right at the kitchen table.
R.J. Reynolds became the title sponsor. renaming the Grand National Series to the Winston Cup in 1971. That would increase the points fund from $750,000 to $2 million.
Side by side to the line, Kenton!
Many people consider the $2.4 billion Fox TV deal as Junior's greatest accomplishment in 1999, but his son argues that fact.
One thing that meant a lot to him was getting NASCAR to Indianapolis back in '94. I know that was an accomplishment that a lot of people didn't think was possible. And then it was a very successful event.
The family's legendary vision continued with grand tracks like Las Vegas, while smaller tracks began closing, like North Wilkesboro.
You have to try to grow the sport. And to do that, you got to take some risk. And so that was always instilled in us.
How do you think your dad and your grandfather would feel about NASCAR having its own Hall of Fame and being a part of that inaugural induction class?
Well, they would not want to be part of it. They would defer themselves. My training, my background is that that you promote the drivers and the team owners, and as my dad used to say, they're the actors on the stage. Promote yourself is that's just not how we're wired. But those guys put their whole life building this sport. They made the kind of contribution that warrants them being in the Hall of Fame, and they earned it.
Coming up, another man who earned it.
The King, Richard Petty. What else needs to be said? You're watching the special presentation, First Class. Welcome back to this special presentation, First Class. Our last inductee drove this number 43 car back in 1974 to 10 wins and his 5th championship.
That's why they call him the King. 200 wins and 7 Cup championships.
It may seem an unlikely place for racing's greatest name. Level Cross, North Carolina is near Greensboro off Highway 220. But this little community is known around the world as the domain of NASCAR's king.
I grew up around it, okay?
For Richard Petty, it was always about family. His father, Lee, won 3 championships. Lee and wife Elizabeth lived in this house, while Lee built an ever-growing collection of buildings next door that would house the race team.
He was the first professional driver, mechanic, and car owner that went and done it and stayed with it all those years.
Richard, brother Maurice, and cousin Dale Inman kept Lee's famous number 42 running up front.
Lee was driving the car, and me and Richard and Maurice had to work on his car before we could go to our favorite swimming hole.
And when the time came, Richard became the next generation behind the wheel, and it was still a family affair.
I've never done anything by myself. I've always had somebody to either help me or push me or make it happen.
He drove a convertible in his first race in Columbia, South Carolina in 1958 and got his first win in Charlotte at the old Fairgrounds track in 1960. Over the next few years, he became racing's first true superstar, winning his first championship in 1964, and in 1967 winning another championship highlighted by an incredible 27 wins, including 10 in a row.
He just was determined that he couldn't be beat no matter what the situation was.
I was able to grow with it at the time that it needed people like, me and Pearson and Allison and Baker and Yarborough.
For the next decade, Petty would be almost unstoppable. He drove racing's wildest car, the 1970 Plymouth Superbird. He signed racing's biggest sponsorship deal, mixing the famous Petty Blue with STP Red on car number 43. Along with that Superbird, this is another famous 43. This is that '84 Pontiac Grand Prix that the King drove to victory lane at Daytona for his 200th win, and he did it in front of President Ronald Reagan.
Richard Petty was just in front of Dale Yarborough.
He wound up winning the 200th race in front of the President of the United States on July the 4th on the very last green flag lap.
We're pleased you're here, and we're pleased we won the race because you're here.
What movie people would have took that? There's no way all these things came together.
Though he did race for 8 more years, win number 200 was Petty's last trip to victory lane as a driver.
It's not a farewell tour because I'm not going anywhere.
His 1992 Fan Appreciation Tour was another milestone for the King and his fans. His final race at Atlanta was the first race for a young rookie named Jeff Gordon. Petty did celebrate with son Kyle in his 8 Cup wins, but the years following saw some of the darkest valleys.
I guess I was 6 years old when I first got in the go-kart.
Including the death of Richard's grandson and the heir apparent to the Petty legacy, Adam Petty, and wife Linda's cancer battle. And again, the faith and family that shared the celebrations now shared the sorrows.
Fortunately, we've had a lot of good people around me, had a lot of good family around me that helped me get through these situations.
Adam Petty's death was the inspiration for the Victory Junction Gang Camp in Level Cross, where Richard and Kyle host children whose physical limitations would otherwise keep them from enjoying this kind of fun.
Just believing that everything happens for the better, okay, no matter how bad we think it is.
I've won over 200 races, but I've had over 700 headaches.
Petty's also familiar as a commercial spokesman. He was one of the first drivers to pitch products, and he's still doing that today.
A child saw you in person somewhere and said, "That's the guy that's on the Goodies commercials." That's how the kid.
Well, you got to be known for something. I guess that's as good as anything.
But the reputation that has him in the Hall of Fame is that of the sport's dominant competitor and personality. The fan-friendly legend who still takes the time to sign every last autograph with that trademark swirl, and who stands as the sport's biggest icon.
The Hall of Fame kind of brings out some of the stuff that you kind of left behind you, and I guess a lot of times it makes you really feel good and feel proud that you had a lot of good people around you that pushed you and made it work.
And what started in Level Cross more than 50 years ago is first across the stripe in the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
There you have it, 5 legends, 5 class acts, the first class inducted into NASCAR's Hall of Fame.
Thanks for joining us, and congratulations to the first class.